Okay, so this is a demonstration of the LDAP enhancements in release 5.0 of dcTrack, and this is accessible from admin, appliance settings. So we have our LDAP server settings. And one difference that you'll notice right away is now we have the ability to have multiple server configurations. Here we have the ability to enable or disable LDAP feature for all of the servers that we've configured. We've got the ability to add a server, initiate a search. There's some common settings that will be applied to all of the servers. So first, let's take a look at the settings for the first server that we have configured. And in the general settings area, we see that the first thing that we have is the option to indicate what type of server. We have option for Active Directory or for a generic LDAP server. And the difference is the default attributes that will be applied later on in the configuration. Also, we can enable or disable individual servers when we have more than one configured. The next section is for the connection, and in this case, since this is an Active Directory, we have the domain. Or alternatively, in certain user environments, users prefer to have an explicit host name or IP address for a specific domain controller that they want to authenticate users against. So that's what this option allows us to do. And the next section is whether we want to have communications encrypted and what port should be used. Finally, whether we want to use the certificate on the server strictly for the purposes of encryption, or whether we want to validate all of the certificate attributes, including host name and validity period, as well as the recognized certification authority. So that's the section for connection. Then we get into the bind section, and here we're indicating the base DN for where we're going to initiate searches and where we would locate our users. Here, this is the login name attribute, and we see that the default value, which corresponds to Active Directory of SAM account name, has been populated, although we can edit it. And then there's a search filter to help narrow down the scope of our search and make our searches more efficient. This is user configurable as well. This is the default that's provided. And then we have the search scope. And here we've got options for whether we want to go one level down or search the entire subtree, starting with the base that was specified for the search. We have an option to enable or disable following referrals as they're provided back from the server. And then we've got options for how it is that we want to authenticate when we're initiating our searches. So we've got anonymous, if anonymous bind is supported on the server. No search indicates that we're not going to be using a service account when we're conducting searches, but rather we're going to be using the credentials that are provided by the user on login. And then use admin credentials, as is configured here, is where we're setting up a service account, and this is the DN of that admin service account and the password. So this is the bind section of the settings. The next section of the settings is really the heart of the improvements, the enhancements that were done in 5.0 to support groups and the import of groups into dcTrack from LDAP. So now, by using groups for authorization, then what we're doing is basically we have the ability to import groups. Once we've imported groups, we can indicate whether we want to synchronize the group members automatically. So that way we don't have to worry about managing the users individually. Basically, once those groups are imported into dcTrack and the synchronization is automatically done, as new members are added to those groups, they'll be added into dcTrack. As members are moved between groups, that group membership, the updates will be reflected in dcTrack as well. And then when members are removed from groups, they will also be removed from the groups in dcTrack. So here we also have the option to specify where we would like the search for groups to begin. So if we want to have a base DN for that search that's different than the user, we'd be able to specify that here. And then again, the attributes that we would use for the groups. And here we're using a default of the SAM account name, the member attribute is member, and the object class for the filter here is group. But again, this is user configurable, so we can use this to narrow the scope of our searches and make the search more efficient. And similar to the scope for the search, we have the ability to indicate whether we want one level or the entire subtree. Now, another feature that's been added here is this test connection. So once we have our configuration set up, we can use a test account and some credentials to test out our setup. And in this case, we're able to basically just verify that, in fact, our settings are configured correctly using our test account. Okay. So that's how you set up your server. The LDAP server is very similar. It just basically populates the settings with the default attributes that would be used for Open LDAP configuration. So now, one of the things that we can do once we've got our servers configured is we can initiate a search. And here we can select our users, or we can search for groups. So in this case, we're going to search for groups, and we're going to go back to that same server that we were just looking at, again using our stored admin credentials. Here's the base DN information and filter that was specified previously. So now we've gone to Active Directory. We're returning the list of groups, and we see that some of these groups have already been added into dcTrack. So we've got the viewers, members, managers, gatekeeper groups from our example that have been added to dcTrack. We can click on one of the groups and then scroll down to see who the members of that group are. And so there are really two modes of operation. You can think of an explicit mode of operation, which is how the LDAP configuration operated in release 4.0, where we are actively searching for users and then saying, I want to add this user into dcTrack. So that's the explicit mode. And you still can do that. You can search either by user or search by group, and then specify that you want to add a user into dcTrack. Or there's the automatic mode, which is where we're going to be really importing groups, and then we're going to be syncing the members of the groups into the groups that have been imported into dcTrack. So this last section here under Common Settings is really where we set this up, where we're going to one, we can enable or disable the LDAP module functionality. We can also indicate when we're conducting a search if we want to basically cap the number of results that would be returned. And here is where we're going to enable LDAP sync. Whether we want to sync the group members, this is basically where we've got the automatic synchronization of the user group members based on the user groups that have been imported. And then we can specify a sync interval. So the synchronization of the users and the group is done opportunistically. So whenever they log in, we are going to inspect their information and user group membership information to determine if there's been any changes there. And also, if there hasn't been an update or synchronization hasn't occurred within the specified interval, then once that interval expires, we will communicate with the LDAP server and synchronize the objects that have been imported into dcTrack. And then, of course, there's the Sync Now option so that you can do it on demand as well. So that's a summary of the enhancements that are available in Release 5.0 from the point of view of support for the existing method of adding users into dcTrack. That's still available for those who were 4.0 users. So you'll see that this hasn't really changed at all. You still have the ability to go out, search for users, and you get the list of users and still have the ability to explicitly indicate whether you want to import them or not. Of course, in a user environment, they would either be working in an explicit mode or in the automatic mode.